You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Enters Pacific Rim. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of HanBaron on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. After the battle with the newest threats to Japan, the Rangers took their time to celebrate and reflect a bit on their victories. With the pilots of Chimera Ronin thinking of ways to mark their victories on their machine. As well as a name for the AI of their machine. How about MHA? Anna asks while looking up the names that a few of the other ace used. Going off of one of the Celtic goddesses? Nah, doesn't feel right. They sounded more like a male, Terry said while checking some readouts the technicians shared. Will hummed before bringing up his own thought. How about Shiva? Seems right for a righteous destroyer. His siblings look at him a bit funny but agree and confer with the AI itself. I suppose that will do. Jaeger AI support, designation, Shiva. Operating in Chimera Ronin, the data entity says within the Conpod. With the general affairs in line and the new Shattered Dome completed, the newest Rangers to protect Japan set off. With some pomp and circumstance both when leaving and arriving to their new home. With Izuku and Melissa though, they had decided to approach something they had been avoiding for a while. So about the kiss. And what I know you saw later. Melissa started with her cheeks scarlet and looking away from Izuku. Yeah, look. I'm not really sure either of us knows what a relationship could hold. Not to mention, we've got other things to worry about. Maybe we could see where it goes when we've got more room to stand. Because as things stand, we kind of alone with protecting Japan and the world. Sort of. Izuku was blushing the whole time, but his words did make sense to Melissa. As much as either of them may have wanted to start a relationship, now isn't the right time. You're right. Until we can get some more Jaegers and Rangers here. We don't have that kind of luxury, the engineer-turned-pilot says while looking down. But when she looks up, she gets a pleasant surprise. Izuku was right in front of her, and he quickly kissed her. She reciprocates and they stay there for a while. When they separated, Izuku said, something for later. I guess. Elsewhere around the country and world, the information, or rather theory that the precursors could have unleashed some kind of virus to mutate and weaken humanity had been circulating. Which led to increased attacks by certain groups. Namely the CRC and Humarais. The former of which used it as a reason to justify their persecution. The latter though eased off of their dangerous pursuits and actions. We may have sought to end all those with quirks originally. But now is the time that we help find a path back toward our humanity. The leader of the cult, Fleck Turn, was saying this during a meeting with his members in Atheon. He and many other leaders sought redemption by offering some of themselves up for testing of ways to remove quirks. While some of their quirkless members were sent to Island to begin the testing and training to become Rangers. This will not end the doomsday that is approaching us quickly. But it will help to slow it. If only for a time, the blue-skinned man said before releasing some of the scientists. Hoping that they, with the help of others, could find a true cure for quirks. Before some of them left though, he pleaded with some to find a way to remove his own quirk. A few looked at him like he was mad, but others could see the hint of suffering in his eyes. Perhaps we could find a way to make a gaseous version. But we need to find the cure first. Fleck Turn nodded and wished them luck on finding just that. He then addressed the rest of the members and told them to turn themselves in to be a test subject for a cure. Or we find those who are still human. And we protect them. From the monsters like the Meta Liberation Army. But these are more stories for another time. At UA, May and the rest of the support students were testing the newest version of the small Jaegers. Though mostly in the practical application or potential movement. After Bakugou almost cooked his brain, they had taken to building the pieces such as the muscle strands or joints of the machines first. Okay, this is the bare minimum when we start to get some complications. Thanks, Sakuwaja-san. May says to her grandfather who was quirkless. The older man was a bit annoyed at having to be a part of these tests for gadgets, as he saw it. But he couldn't refuse his granddaughter when she gave him the puppy dog eyes. Which did look a little odd given her scope eyes. So then. What exactly were you hoping to learn or find? He asked after being let out of the drift machine. May and a few other students were focused on analyzing the data, so an upperclassman explained. We were hoping to find the limit of where a normal human can manipulate a small Jaeger. Then we can get an estimate on who with quirks could use the technology. The old man just looks at the student as to say that he didn't understand. The senior clears his throat before simplifying the explanation with, we needed to get a scale to adjust to. Which is easier, and the old man takes his leave. But not before getting a hug from his granddaughter again. With the baseline set, the support students spent weeks preparing a smaller model of Jaeger. Finally getting it right after half a dozen failed machines. They took to making a machine that seemed similar to a small version of Gypsy Breaker. The height of it only came to 50 feet or so. But that wasn't the part they were proud of / concerned about. They tested the drift potential and found that they could use it to make the machine move. Even with their quirks. Though I don't think we'd be the best ones to pilot this thing, one student says while looking over the readouts. Another student agrees and notes that they don't have the combat potential or training to make the most out of it. Which is why we need to get to testing some of the hero course students to see if they can do it. Power Loader says over a hologram projected into the development studio. We also should consider that we shouldn't stick to one type. We could make a few others. May says with a manic look in her eyes. And while some were skeptical, others did see her point. Especially if they were other small kaiju that could attack. With some plans set, the students agreed to send out a few emails and put up flyers around campus to tell those same students that they need subjects. Once some of the various course students see it, they all start to contemplate the merits. Think you'll do it? Don't know. I've heard there's a serious risk if you aren't compatible. I'm not risking my brains leaking out. It's a chance to, even if only as backup, be a bigger hero than most are. Yeah, but is that worth the danger of well you know? With the top students at UA, the big three, they were also discussing the matter. As much as I'd like to help, I don't think it'd be a good idea. Togata Mirio says with a serious face opposite of his usual demeanor. His nervous friend Amajiki Tamaki is surprised by this and asks why. It's because of our quirks PRD. Our instincts at using them would actually be a bad thing, the blonde student note. Acknowledging that since everyone has different instincts for different quirks, that would cause problems when linking minds. The periwinkle-haired Hado Nijire hums for a moment before saying, you have a point. But maybe we could help in a different way. The two look at her funny before asking what she had in mind. While they were discussing the matter, the classes of 1A and 1B were considering the merits of testing the small Jaegers. It'd be a chance to be as heroes just like the Rangers. We'd get to show that we can be heroes as cool as them. Minoru Mineta says to a few of his friends during a break PRD. Maybe. But my brain already shorts out as is. I don't need something else breaking or hurting it. Kaminari Denki says with a shake of his head. Hanada Siro notes that Bakugou got into some trouble when he tested the smaller piece. Maybe it has something to do with the power or strength of the quirks. It could be that only those with weaker or more subtle quirks would have more potential. Saying that makes Todoroki Shoto question the idea in his mind as well. I've got more power than my father. Bakugou and I were roughly at the same level of power potential. So I'd be useless or in the way in situations involving kaiju. Shoto thinks and puts in his own thoughts on who would be better to test the Jaegers. Noting Mineta, Shiro, Mina, Koda, Uraraka, and Kirishima as the better options for testing. While a few thought he was being arrogant by saying they would be safer given their weaker powers, the class rep Yaoyorozu agreed with him. In general, I'd say that the emitter types would have the greatest variety and yet the most likely capability to be able to operate in the drift. She then notes that heteromorph and transform types would probably be the least likely, given the radical changes and capabilities of those quirks. Momo says with a slightly ashamed look. Shoji chuckles a bit before agreeing with her. Given how much we've been changed, it could be that we've had more neurons lost because of that, he says while rubbing his mask a bit. After thinking that a few of them start contemplating and make plans to help with testing. Though it would have to wait for another day, as it was time for their next class with All Might. He'd initially focused on combat classes, but with the greater threat of the kaiju he'd shifted his plans. Starting with the focus on evacuation and rescue from destruction. Namely caused by him, as he'd use his power to cause a bit of damage from his punches and shockwaves. He'd then have the students running through the cities to find the various victims and help with triage and evacuation. This is the best way I can help them get ready for what could come next. All Might thinks in his true form while observing. Since he'd made this change and was always sending out the entire classes, he didn't need to be in muscle form constantly. So, he could preserve his power for later. After the classes were done, a few of the students of 1A headed to the development studio. And they were met by a few from the various other classes. Even one or two from the general course. We couldn't make it into the hero class because our quirks weren't flashy or powerful enough. But here, that is more of a problem. Hitoshi Shinso says with a look to the other first-year students. Ochiko feels nervous about the matter, but she hopes this could give her more of a chance to be a hero and give her parents a better life. Once in the studio, the Gravity Girl was a bit surprised by the machines involved. It seemed to be more of a medical setup rather than something to link them to a Jaeger. "Oh, you the next one? Come on in," an older student said before directing Ochiko to table to lay down on. Once there, they put on a few medical sensors and then the helmet to test the drift potential for their current subject. They start the tests with a brain donated from an average hero that had donated his organs after his death. The hero didn't have a strong quirk, and they noted that he had the bare minimum needed for half of the drift. At least for a small Jaeger. This was when Ochiko felt the memories of the hero in question. Getting caught up in the emotions and panic that the hero felt at times. Especially when he died due to trying to save people during the first attacks by the kaiju. She has impulses of wanting to fight back and tries to use her quirk or attack the phantom enemies. "Hey! Calm down. You aren't under attack and you at the location you think you are," shouts Nijire while gently holding Ochiko's arms. The third year was among a group of stronger quirked students who thought that they could help by bringing some of the test subjects out of panic if necessary. Working to help the teens focus on the moment, not the visions and memories they were experiencing. Ochiko hyperventilates a bit before following Nijire's voice back to reality. I'm okay. I'm okay. Oh, this is giving me a bit of a headache. But I think I'm okay. Ochiko says while calming down. Nijire nods and helps her to relax. Ochiko eventually gets the hang of the drift and can get a feel for the sensations. With the testing done, she is let out and would be told the results another day. We'll let you know who you might be more compatible with later. For now, we have more to test. May says before trying to push the brown-haired girl out of the studio. A dozen of tests later, and the support course students have their test pilots. Though they also go about grouping some of the applicants based on other factors. Which is especially important for the first two test teams for the smaller Jaegers. Mineta, Shiro, Uraraka, and Koda. The four of you are excused from afternoon classes. Head to the development studio. They need your help. Aizawa says before explaining the scenario for the next Hero Studies class. Each of them gulp but are also excited for the new ways they can become heroes. Wonder what the machines they'll have us testing will be like. Mineta says with a little spring in his step. The others from his class chuckle before noting they'd see soon enough. Once they reached the studio, they saw a few from 1B and Shinso as well. From 1B, Kodai Yui, Kendo Itsuka, and Narenjiki Shota. So we're the chosen few. Wonder how this will go. Shinso says with a slight chuckle. The door opened and they are suddenly ambushed by Mei. Or at least a few of them were. She rushed forward and grabbed Mineta and Achiko to pull them in. Or in Mineta's case, she picked him up and carried him in. Him stuck under her arm and getting his cheek pressed into her bub. This is the greatest day of my life, he thinks while a bit of BLD trickles out his nose. But that changes when she tosses him at one of the machine cockpits. And seeing that it wasn't as cool as he thought. It looks like a piece of junk, he thinks aloud. Only to slightly regret it when he sees the looks from a few of the students. He's not entirely wrong. I wouldn't say this is the most impressive Jaeger we've ever built. Power loader jokes from his holoprojection. While they had a small gypsy breaker, they had wanted to make variation for other options. Some looked better than others. The one Mineta was tossed to was a turtle-looking machine that seemed to have parts scavenged from other machines. Like excavators and even some of Power Loader's mechs. It was a bit shorter, about 40 feet tall. Mei then steps forward to explain a bit about what the machine could do. It's true that it isn't pretty, but it has some other potential. Namely, it can move a bit faster than some of the others, and it has multiple missile launchers for combat. She brings up the specs and shows it to Mineta and Zero. Saying they were chosen to be the pilots for the machine. Shinso and Koda were directed to a different machine that seemed to have sonic types of weaponry as well as shoulder plasma cannons. Shota and Itsuka were to pilot a defensive machine with expandable shield arms and a few cannons. With Yui and Achiko piloting the mini gypsy. Power Loader cleared his throat before telling each of the students to get to their machines. We need to test the power and potential each of you have to make the machines move, he said before cutting off the transmission. As there was a new threat Titan might had to deal with. Yui and Achiko shared a look before looking up at the machine they were to pilot. Achiko shrugs before saying, well. Shall we? Yui's expression doesn't change but she nods as they climb up to enter the small Jaeger. Once inside, they see the drift hardware is waiting for them and they put it on. As well as stepping into the foot links to make the legs move. Okay. We're going to start with some minor things. Testing if you can drift with each other properly and you'll make the arms move. Mei explains before shouting to some others to monitor the vitals and reactions. The two brunettes look at each other with a bit of fear, but with a gulp they ask for the tests to begin. They feel the shock and strange sensation of linking their nervous systems as the drift was powered up. They get lost in a few of the memories but when Achiko latches onto the memory of Nijire talking her down the two can focus in on the moment. They take a few breaths before saying they were ready. Okay. I want you to move the arms and try to lift up a few of those barrels, one upperclassman announces while watching the monitors. The two gulp before moving their arms in sync to reach over and pick up what was asked. And it works perfectly. They don't feel massive strain as they reach out for the barrels. Bringing them up and not bending or breaking the metal drums. Okay. Shut it down. Mei shouts after Achiko and Yui had made the small Jaeger move. They return to a neutral position and the drift is stopped. It worked. It worked perfectly, the support students cheer after seeing the mini gypsy moving and no strain to the pilots. This even gets the other test pilots excited as they climb up to their own machines to test the drift and links. The results are a bit mixed over the week or so of testing. Mineta and Zero have some trouble making their machine move at times. Partially due to the fact that it is a bit bigger in build compared to others. And it has the capability to roll rather than just running. We're lucky they finally got the rolling gyros working proper. Mineta said after one day of testing. The first time they tried the rolling function, they were sick in minutes because the whole body rotated. Rather than it being a free-floating cockpit that didn't rotate in sync with the body. After the testing was done, they were relaxing in the development studio, where they saw that Titan Might and Chimera Ronin were each engaging new kaiju threats. How many is that now? Zero questioned while drinking from his water bottle. But before anyone could answer, an alarm rang out down by the docks in Mustafa. A small kaiju had arrived. When Chimera Ronin killed the jaw hide, it had been implanted with a few eggs to grow and become kaiju. Now a few of them were rampaging through the streets of Mustafa. And the main Jaegers were too far away to deal with them. Looks like we'll be getting some more practical data today. Power Loader shouts before calling UA and telling the students to prepare the small Jaegers. When they hear this though, most of the test pilots think the pro is crazy. With Mineta shouting, we just barely gotten these things to manageable level. We can't fight those things. Zero agrees with his partner and cries out, we don't even have weapons. May pipes up and says, oh yes we do. But we need to finish a few of them. So, Mini Gypsy and Coyote Pup will have to be the first ones out. She then grabs Ochiko and Yui to get them up to their Jaeger while some of the others grabbed Shinso and Koda to get to their machine. Koda signs that this whole matter is crazy and they can't do this. But his partner grabs his shoulders and gets him to focus on the moment. Right now we've got a variety of monsters barreling towards the city. We have to be the heroes. Just like I hoped for and you have been training to be. The rock-headed student gulps while still trembling in the cockpit. But he remembers the memory that Jason shared to remind the Rangers of what they were up against. And the last moments of the hero they had originally drifted with. How he gave everything to save others. Okay, let's do this. Koda says after taking a few deep breaths. He quickly changes and gets ready to drift with Shinso to face the small jaw hides. Ochiko and Yui have less to worry about and they quickly get into the headspace to get their little Jaeger moving. And with a breath and punching their fists into their hands, they move out to try and save the city. You ready for this, Yui? Yeah. Time to bust those gators, the pair say to each other as they start their march into the city. Just a bit ahead of Koda and Shinso. Back in the city, the heroes are attacking the creatures and having mixed results. Empty Lady herself is taller than the beasts, but the creatures are much stronger and more ruthless than her. Proven by her being cut apart by the claws and her hand and legs getting badly broken by the beasts biting down on her. She only avoids permanent disfigurement by the arrival of the small Jaegers. With Shinso and Koda blasting a few of the beasts from long range with the cannons on their shoulders. And then Mini Gypsy runs in to attack the kaiju head-on. This diversion gives Empty Lady the chance to shrink down so Death Arms and Kamui Woods can get her to an ambulance. Okay. There's 4 small kaiju here. There might be more but these are the ones that made landfall. Coyote. You need to get down here too. Ochiko says after they punched away 2 of the kaiju. While Koda would prefer to keep their distance, Shinso's will and influence is enough to make him more willing to charge in. They run towards the jaw hides and use one of the sonic cannons on the arms to disorient the creatures. Then laying into the monsters with their fists. Yui and Ochiko are in much the same place as they focus on fighting hand to hand and then using some of the environment. Just like we'd do if we were using our quirks. Right, partner? Ochiko says as they pick up some containers and throw them or use the items to enhance their blows. The blue-eyed girl smirks before saying, yeah. Now let's crush these things. They punch the sides and other softer-looking spots on the kaiju while waiting for backup. Which comes in with an excited, woo-hoo. Incoming. That being the announced words of Mineta and Zero as they barreled towards the fight in roller form. With Coyote taking advantage of this by disorienting a kaiju with their sonic cannons. And then tossing it into the path of the scrappy machine. It impacts the center mass of the crocodilian kaiju and sends it flying back towards the water. Whoa. Okay then. Eat. This, the two pilots say as some of the defensive plates shift to the side, revealing missile launcher beneath them. MHA makes sure they are locked on and the munitions unleash from the back of the small Jaeger, then breaking apart into smaller cluster munitions, impacting the small kaiju and blowing it up from all around and inside. Given the munitions were anti-kaiju burrowing rounds. While the two inside were celebrating their victory, they were about to be ambushed by another jawhide from behind. But they were saved thanks to the arrival of a slower but crazy armed machine. The one piloted by Itsuka and Shota. They first took to firing away with the cannons from the wrists and chest before getting into close range. And then the arms rotated to a set with better defenses and striking capabilities, punching the head of the creature before grabbing the mouth to hold it open. When the small jawhide tried to claw at them, they expanded the arm shields. Okay Shota. We're safe for now. Take the shot, Itsuka commanded while holding her position. The shorter boy nodded before taking aim with the chest cannons, and unloading bullet after bullet into the throat and head of the kaiju. With their backup arrived, the other two machines focused on their small kaiju, with the mini gypsy giving the creature a solid hit to the sides of its head, then turning one hand into a plasma cannon and blasting the stomach and then face of the small kaiju. Koda and Shinso meanwhile used sonic blasts to make the kaiju sick and collapse to the ground. They then used a special set of secondary cannons to blast into the side of kaiju while it was down. With that the fight of the small Jaegers was done. Or so they thought. Right as they were recovering from the maneuvers and combat, another larger jawhide surged up from the sea. The students tried to get back in sync, but they couldn't get the drift system started quick enough. But they were saved by the return of Titan Might, with it firing a short Minnesota barrage to kill the 100-foot-tall kaiju. It marches up and sees the small machines and kaiju, with some of the students coming out to see better. Well now, it seems Power Loader and the support students project bore some fruit. You all had better get used to hearing this, so we'll say it now, the Rangers say while looking down at the small Jaegers and pilots. You can almost see the smile on Titan Might's face/head as well as those of the Rangers as they say, "Thank you for saving everyone." The UA students are surprised and it grows as they hear cheering and applause from some of the heroes and cleanup crews nearby. A few of them had expected this, but some it was more than they believed would happen. With Shinso crying a bit as he thought, "I did it. I'm really a hero." And back at UA the support students were celebrating as well, looking forward to the creation of more small Jaegers, to help protect the world from all the forms of kaiju. Izuku smirked a bit as the mini Jaegers went back toward UA. "What are you thinking about?" Melissa asked with a smile. Izuku just rolled his eyes before saying, "You know what I'm thinking. You're inside my head." "I know. But I wanted to hear it from you," she said with a nod. Izuku chuckled a bit before noting that it was a strange feeling that they had inspired others, even if it's just inside of a Jaeger. Melissa nodded and said that this had only just begun. When the students had returned to UA, cheers were what they were greeted with, especially from the support students. "That was great. Our babies took out a bunch of kaiju. No way support companies can ignore us now. We need to consider some more mass production." While they were talking, a few of the small Jaeger pilots were having to stop and catch their breath. "Man. That feels funny." Mineta groans when decoupled from Zero, who rolls some kinks out of his neck before agreeing. "I wonder if this is what it's like for the main Rangers." Koda was in a similar situation and needed help from Shinso to get out of their machine. Shota and Itsuka had somewhat similar trouble, but not as extreme. Ochiko and Yui though had little issue going over to help their fellow test subjects once they were out of their machines. Once they were out and recovered though, they were greeted by cheers from their fellow students just outside of the development studio, with the loudest being from the general course, praising Shinso for being a hero like they all wished they could be. bringing some new tears to the sleepy-eyed student's eyes. Vlad King sighed before admitting, "We're probably going to be losing more students now." Aizawa just shrugged before saying, "It'll give me some more time to sleep. And besides, it's for the best in some cases." Vlad gives his fellow first-year teacher a look before rolling his eyes and congratulating his students. After this, more applicants to test mini Jaegers swarmed the development studio. But most were turned away due to a few things. "We don't have that many built as is. And to be honest, we're not really at the mass production stage." Power Loader explained to a crowd of students who were hoping to pilot a Jaeger. While there were some groans, most left and hoped that they could get the chance when some new mini Jaegers were built. "You know, we should have a better name for these than just mini Jaeger," May said while tapping the leg of the small gypsy. The old name was apparently Rogue Jaeger. "Not sure you want to go with that," Melissa said over a hollow call. She was smiling at the inventor girl while looking over the details of the various small Jaegers. And then offering ideas for improvement on the machines, which all of the support students were happy to take. "These will be a huge help, Hatsum-san and Shield-san. If we can build more, then we might be able to give you Rangers more support in the defense of a port," Nizu says while looking over the ideas. With some plans set in motion, the world feels even safer than before. Especially with a number of hero course students taking time to learn to be mini Jaeger, or as they eventually came to be known, Sentinel pilots. Though some were more annoyed or frustrated by the shift. "What's even the point to being in the hero course if we can't even really be heroes?" Bakugou exclaimed after an exercise. It was another one focusing on evacuation and rescue. Meaning his quirk was basically useless and he was in the way more than anything. Comparatively, Todoroki was using his ice in ways to make it easier to evacuate. And under the threat of a kaiju attack, he learned to shift to his flames and quickly melt all of his ice. To keep the monsters from using the glaciers he made as weapons or something to make more debris. Man! This isn't getting much easier. Wonder what the next evacuation exercise will be, some of the first years murmur while walking back from ground beta. Others were noting that the sports festival had been cancelled and some other villains had been helping with evacuation. So there was no need to fight villains anymore. Shoji pulled at his mask a bit before saying, "Makes you wonder if all the major combat agencies will shut down. I know Endeavor has put everything into adjusting his agency, but there have been rumors that Mirko has been so bored she's been drinking." "I heard that too. I mean, she never focused on anything but fighting villains. And as much as she seemed to love a fight, without it she doesn't have much else to do," Sato said as the hero students were arriving at the locker rooms. Bakugou meanwhile was gripping his fists tight and grinding his teeth. Because as it stood, his quirk was only good for fighting. And those who could fight had no place as heroes anymore. Even if he got his hero license, there was a good chance he would never be hired at an agency. "The way things are going, I'm probably going to be stuck being a freeter or just something like an office worker. There would be no point to my education," he raged in his mind while changing out of his costume. Most of his fellow hero hopefuls could feel the rage flowing off of him. But none of them could give him any kind of advice. So they just let him stew a bit while leaving the locker room. With some quietly commenting that he was going to be in big trouble going forward. Given he couldn't really operate in evacuations with his quirk. Maybe he could sell his sweat or something to arsenal companies. That or mining companies. That's about all he or his quirk are good for, some comment while walking back to the classroom. This would be the same trend for a few weeks, while the Rangers were improving and growing their ranks. With Izuku and Melissa finally getting a real break thanks to a newly added second unit to the Mustafa Shatter Dome. Oni Rumble Guess it fits with those horns and the Thunderbusters. Melissa commented while looking over the machine in question. The machine was a bit shorter than Titan Might, but it was much bulkier. Looking more barrel-chested compared to the superhero physique Titan Might had. That made it a bit slower, but it had higher defenses and some shocking weapons. Namely, that the main arms had electrical punching power. as did a secondary set just below the main arms. Though these arms were not often used as they were made fire at range and protect the body of the machine. As well as when they were extended, all of the arms could spin and bash through the enemy. To finish some of the defenses, the con pod had two special aspects. 1. The main head was smaller compared to other con pods and was disguised by a helmet-like feature. And that was the second defense. The horns of the helmet not only could have a charge run through them, but it could be detached if it was grabbed by the kaiju. At least we didn't have to use that feature right away, one of the pilots said. His name was Samuel Wadi, a larger man from Jakarta. His partner was Budi Effendi, an equally large man by their home region standards. Though the latter was often more composed compared to his friend. The duo showed their competency when they defended Japan from a duo of Category 3 kaiju. First bludgeoning one to death with their electrified fists. And the second was finished by a barrage of plasma shots from all the arms. Nizu nodded and complimented the men while also assuring them on a different matter. Aside from having a few more sentinels sent down toward the Philippines and Indonesia, we will make sure your nation gets more actual Jaegers and Rangers. But for now. He trailed off before looking to Izuku and Melissa. The former of whom looked ready to fall asleep where he stood. And the latter was already asleep. A few laughs were had before Nizu dismissed the pair. They'd been on call for nearly 2 weeks. Even with Chimera Ronin, we still had to keep Titan Might ready. And they'd had to take out 4 kaiju themselves. Not like they were big ones, but still. Neither of us have really slept for all this time. I think the last time we didn't have an alarm go off was a month ago. And that's not counting the handful of break-ins. Izuku said with a yawn. The Rangers of Oni Rumble said they could get some sleep. You two are the best in Japan after all. It won't do us much good if you can't really fight. Wadi said with a smirk. Izuku thanked him before trying to wake up Melissa so they could get some proper sleep. And even when the alarm did go off, Oni Rumble went out to deal with the matter. So the 2 Rangers could get some more sleep. And once they had gotten some rest, while still dealing with at least 1 kaiju attack, Nizu brought up a different matter for the 2. I think you both could use more of a real break, he said while sipping on some tea in his office at UA. He was currently on a holo call with the Rangers and suggested that they take some time to relax. You've been pushing yourselves pretty hard. Even with some support from our newest Rangers, you haven't taken much time for yourselves. While they wanted to disagree, a bigger part of both of them knew he was right. So what do you suggest? Izuku asked a bit nervously. Nizu hums for a moment before checking something on his computer. And then showing the 2 a resort down in Okinawa. This is what I suggest. I believe it would do you both some good to take time and enjoy the ocean without having to fight in it. Melissa adjusts her glasses while looking at the website before saying it did sound fun. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind a break. Izuku still looked a bit uneasy, but he also knew it wouldn't be the last time he heard about this. So with a sigh he agreed and Nizu set things up for the 2 to go to Okinawa for a vacation. And Izuku was surprised that they were set and already on a plane one day after talking to Nizu about that. Is that how he gets things done with UA? That's kind of scary. Izuku says after they 2 had landed. Landing in a private plane that Nizu had arranged. Then they were whisked away to the resort before he really knew what was happening. This place is appealing. Melissa said after changing into some more casual clothes and looking out from their condo. Izuku blinked a few times before really realizing where he was. So we have a week here on this beach and tropical resort. With basically all expenses paid. How long has he been planning this? Izuku thought aloud while looking out on the beach before turning to Melissa. Who was smiling at him and telling him to relax. I never really enjoyed the ocean at Island. It's a man-made place so we didn't have a beach and there wasn't really a good reason to go into the water. She also mentioned that there was always another project that demanded her attention. Even more so when I started learning to be a ranger. So this will be great. Her excitement was infectious and Izuku found himself smiling without realizing it. You know what? You're right. I haven't really gotten to enjoy anything like this for a really long time. Izuku says before going to change into some swim trunks. Melissa followed his lead and changed herself. Wearing quite a nice blue bikini that easily drew Izuku's eyes. Though the girl was admiring the muscles he often hid beneath his clothes. Shaking her head and grabbing his arm to pull him to the sea. With both of them enjoying the water, sun, and sand. Melissa even convinced Izuku to just soak up some sun and tan a bit. Though he did get a minor burn on his legs. Sorry. Didn't really think about that, she said when they changed for dinner. Which was another impressive luxury of the resort Nizu had sent them to. Having some of the freshest seafood and fruit. Though with all this time, the two also took the chance to get more of a feel for what they did feel for each other. With Izuku confronting the matter about 2 days after they had arrived. On a bit of a stormy day, when they had been hoping to go out and swim again. I was wondering if you'd ever really say anything. Though I guess we've been just enjoying things here for the time being. Izuku rubbed the back of his head before admitting he had been thinking about this before. But with all the trouble from kaiju attacks. And the people trying to steal or copy data from Titan Might. Not to mention limited sleep. I hadn't really considered it more. Or knew what to say to give humph. Before Izuku could start rambling, Melissa followed Seal's other advice for when Izuku's mind was running constantly much like Bart's did. So she kissed him again before pulling him to the dining room table. They sat and she wanted to talk it out a bit too. Not just because they were stuck with each other on this vacation. But also so they could continue to work together and stop the kaiju. Plus well. Even before I started drifting with you, I did think you were kind of cute. Melissa said with a blush. Izuku was in the same place but admitted he hadn't thought about it given the situation. Even before we were partners, I thought you were appealing. And cute when you started describing how a machine worked. But, I don't have the best memories with girls. I know. I've been inside your head after all. Melissa said before putting a comforting hand on his. He smiled and noted that he'd seen her memories as well. Including the fact that a few boys who asked her out before had only focused on her looks or the fact of who her father was. They were always looking to get something from you. Or your connections. Izuku said with a slight scowl. Melissa tapped his nose before saying, the fact you are getting mad on my behalf, even just a little, already puts you higher up than some of the others. Izuku was scarlet after the tap and cleared his throat to try and refocus. But he found himself a bit entranced as Melissa laughed and smiled. Eventually settling into a relaxed smile of his own. And then asking, so. Where do we go from here? Or where do you want to go? The question surprised Melissa a little as she had thought he'd ask her to be his girlfriend. Instead, he wanted to know what she wanted. She could tell he was thinking it, but he wanted to respect her as well. So she gently reached up to Izuku's cheek and looked into his eyes. Her blue melding a bit into his green. The two coming together with another kiss. This one being mutual and growing in passion. Melissa squealed a bit when Izuku picked her up after he backed into a wall. Didn't hurt that he moved his hands to tightly grip her peach, which she enjoyed a bit. They continued to make out until Izuku fell back into the bed of his room. Both taking deep breaths while resting on the bed. At least until Melissa noted something poking at her. And they both blushed brightly. I don't have any excuse. Izuku mumbled out. And while Melissa was blushing, she licked her lips before shifting her gaze down at Izuku. A smoldering look with her hair blanketing both sides of her face. Though this only served to make part of Izuku stand more at attention. You don't need an excuse. Let's see if we're compatible with more than just our minds. Melissa said before kissing Izuku again. And subtly undoing the strings on her bikini, while Izuku slid out of his trunks. The rest of the day and through the storm, the two thoroughly enjoyed each other's bodies. Before getting a call from the staff after the weather had passed. Yeah, we're okay. What? Oh, I'm just, we were working out a bit since we couldn't do much else. Have to stay in shape as a ranger after all. Izuku said this while Melissa was resting next to him in bed. The girl having a slightly delirious happy smile on her face while Izuku was answering the call. The staff member mentioned that the restaurant would be open a bit later given the effects of the storm. And that they could set them up with a table. Sure. Yeah, that'll be good. Oh. One other thing, could you set up something for tomorrow? While Izuku and Melissa were enjoying their vacation, Jason was enjoying a different matter. Or rather a different person. While it had just started as in interviews and statements, Walker had grown close to Kazuku Chitose during the few months she had been on the island. He was also waking up next to her with a call from operations at the main hub of the island. Hello. Dave? What's going on? A prediction? From who? Something like that. Triple check their numbers and maybe put a call into anyone who might have a foresight or future prediction power. I may not like quirks, but they can help to be ready for what could come. Oh. You may not like quirks, but you don't seem to mind some of the results of quirks. Chitose says while pressing up against his back and kissing his neck. Jason smiles before turning to kiss her as well. But stopping when he notes that there might be trouble brewing. The blue woman pouts a bit but stops when she sees the severe look in his eyes. Is it that bad? She asks worriedly. Jason sighs before admitting he didn't know. But what I do know, is that this could be one of the biggest offensives the precursors have sent out in a long time. Well? Jason asked after checking in at the Island Shatter Dome. No mistake. Night Eye had knew of a few heroes with more flexible clairvoyance-like powers than his. And they confirmed the numbers. There's going to be a big invasion. David said while biting his lip in worry. Domini let out a sigh before asking what the timeline looked like. 2 weeks. Give or take. And we don't even know the rough categories involved, a scientist said with an uneasy look. The marshals each had frustrated looks before questioning the status of the whole PPDC. Titan Might, Chimera Ronin and Oni Rumble are stationed in Japan. Verdant Edge and Thylasin Scrapper are the main ones protecting Australia and New Zealand. But there is word that they've got a new one they've been finishing. Something Dundee. It's a Mark 6.5 inch. David notes that a new Philippines-only made Jaeger was in development and nearing completion. It's called MangaMuse. I think. It's based on a monster from the region. Specs are interesting if nothing else. The older engineer pulls up the details and it shows that MangaMuse was a thinner type of Jaeger. A Mark 7 with a few special types of weapons. Some brilliant maniac made mini-bot-like weapons to swarm the kaiju. Dave said while noting how they worked. Taking inspiration from the legends of the monster it was named for, the Jaeger could launch small missile-sized robots that could be injected inside a kaiju. And then start eating it after a PRD of time. While this could be a great boon to the Jaegers, there were a number of glitches. Least of which was that they could only be launched at short range. And even once inside the kaiju, some could be broken apart by the movements of the monsters. Luckily it isn't only armed with those. The left arm has a few heat Balareo daggers for some puncture damage. And the right arm has a Laring-style blade. Let alone some very efficient muscle movement and even aquatic potential. With the descriptions given, Jason seemed to be putting together some ideas in his head on what to do next. Giving the orders to have a few of the Jaegers ready to move to Legaspi. We've got some islands to protect and we'll need a number of Jaegers to do it. Perhaps something else could help, sir, one technician noted before bringing up the videos of the Sentinels made by UA's support course. Jason was surprised and acknowledged the creativity. They could be useful. Maybe. We'll see about it after we get down there. Luckily, they don't seem as heavy as a Jaeger. David nods before asking if Gypsy Breaker would be going. Domini answers with, of course he's going. So is Jesus. Right? The young ranger smiled a bit before giving a thumbs up to both marshals. You know me too well. Give Reed and Nizu a call. We'll probably want them and a few others to help with covering the islands. Plan set. Jason goes down to check in on Gypsy for loading to the next war front. But while everyone else was preparing for a new battle, Izuku and Melissa had been enjoying more of their break on the southern island they were on. With both trying their hands at surfing and sailing in some of the local specialties. And when night fell, they'd get to know each other's bodies more intimately. With both being startled by their phones going off during section. Nizu. Sorry sir. I just, couldn't sleep, so I was working out a bit. Huh? Seriously? Izuku put his phone on speaker, as did Melissa with her call from her father. Yes. There will be a massive defense operation. And Titan Might has been ordered to take part. The Rangers both found that odd and asked why Oni Rumble wasn't being sent instead. Walker wants them and the others waiting in case something happens. Besides, aside from 2 experimental machines, most of the Jaegers and pilots taking part will be veterans. David says before listing the other machines off. Verdant Edge, Scud Maxter, and Usherai Brawler being the major ones with Titan Might and Gypsy Breaker. The 2 Rangers gave their affirmatives and said they'd be packed up and ready to return to Mustafa. No, we'll have Titan Might brought to you and you'll walk it the rest of the way. It'll be good training. Nizu said before hanging up. David told Melissa to be careful before hanging up himself. Izuku sighed and stepped out of their condo patio. Melissa noticed that he seemed uneasy. Though some of that might be thanks to the drift, she thought before coming behind him and wrapping him in a hug. Resting her chin on his shoulder before asking what was wrong. I've got a bad feeling. I think we might lose a few people this time. Izuku said. Noting that he felt something from his shared memories with Jason. I'm not sure if it's just because of what happened to him. But he seems to have an instinct for this. And I drifted with him enough during training to pick up on it. Melissa held him a bit tighter before kissing his cheek. We don't know what could happen in this life. Especially now that we're Jaeger pilots. So we make the most of it, and we fight back against the monsters. So we and others have a future. Izuku was a bit wide-eyed at the way she said that and chuckled a bit. You been watching some of the Pentecost speeches? He asked, getting a laugh out of the girl. He leaned his head against hers before thanking Melissa for being there. As they finished their moment, there was a knock at the door. Izuku answered and it was a member of the staff who had something for him. Here you are, sir. The package you asked us to put in for you, he said before handing Izuku a small box. While also holding out another hand for a tip. Izuku coughs a bit before passing a bill to the man and taking his package. What was that about? Melissa asked with a tilt of her head. Izuku gulped a bit before holding the box toward her. She was surprised but took it and opened the box to see a silver V-shaped pendant set with an emerald stone between the V. Along with interesting inlays on it, ones that had red, blue, and white hues to the metal. It's appealing, she said before asking why he got it. Izuku smiled before taking it and asking to put it on her. I thought a bit about it when we were wandering the shops the other day. The owner has a quirk that lets him modify metal a bit and he had some interesting combinations. Before he could start on a tangent about how the shopkeeper's quirk worked, he stopped himself to explain what he went for. The colors are obviously for Titan Might. The great hero you made and fight with. Same with the V. Though it's also for victory. And the emerald, well, that was me. Izuku was blushing and looking away at saying this. Something Melissa found cute and kissed him for. Well, that and the pendant. And while tempted to go further, they both remembered that they had a mission and a Jaeger coming. So they rapidly packed to be ready for Titan Might's arrival. But they were not ready for the helicopters to drop the Jaeger just beyond the resort they were staying at and then land in front of where they were staying to get them aboard. Sorry Rangers. But we have to do this quick. We don't know how bad it really will be and we need to get the Jaegers to the Philippines. With the explanation given, the technicians aboard the helicopter quickly changed the pair into their suits. The helmets weren't put on, but that could be done later. Once inside Titanmite, Melissa got to work with Bridget on making the cores run in sync and then activating the neural handshake. Both of the young Rangers blushed as they had seen their actions over the last few days from the opposite perspective. Not that it stopped them from getting in sync in the drift. In fact, their drift was even stronger than previous activations. Guess this vacation of yours did the trick. Maybe we should have the rest of the Rangers take some extra time off. Despite having a lady on land, so to speak, Jason's barely relaxed in a month. David noted while monitoring from my island. This made the two blush again, as well as getting their hearts racing, but they moved past to ask where they needed to go. Coordinates are being sent to you. Head for Legaspi. They have a rough shatter dome there and it's where you'll meet the experimental Jaeger and her pilots. Understood. I'm guessing you want me to work with them on improving some problems? Melissa asked as the data came in. And the two started their march toward the city and put themselves between the kaiju and the volcano. It takes 5 hours to reach their destination, and their brains are exhausted, but the two defenders of Japan reach Legaspi first. Surprising. Thought the ones from Australia and the Reeds would have made it here first. Izuku said as they arrived to rest themselves in Titanmite. He catches Melissa as they decouple and make their way out of the con pod. And were met by the technicians who quickly moved them to the conference room. Sorry about this, but we need you here for the meeting. You can take a nap if you need it but stay here, the command hero said as they were brought in. Both groaned a bit before trying to rest and get some modicum of sleep. Only getting about 2 hours before alarms went off. Not kaiju alarms, Jaegers arriving. The main ones being the same two they had expected would be closer. Come on. Izuku groaned out while feeling the massive thud of the Jaeger's feet. And since they couldn't hope to get sleep, they made their way to the hangar to see the new Jaeger and Verdant Edge. Ha! Guess they went for a strong but somewhat nimble powerhouse with that Dundee one. Melissa noted while rubbing her eyes. The machine she was talking about was Bravo Dundee. The machine was a brown and black-colored beast that seemed close to Gypsy Danger in height. But a bit thinner in weight. Much like Scud Maxter from the US, it had a brim section atop the con pod to help with defense and sensors. Namely for the two longer-ranged weapons on it. On the left shoulder was a long-range cannon that had high PNTRTN power. But it was very slow firing. The right shoulder meanwhile had a special missile launcher. Aside from obvious explosive missiles, the designer had gone with the idea of special stun or paralyze grapple missiles that would wrap up the legs of the kaiju, leaving it open for the favored weapon of Dundee. That being the various large heat knives that were across the body. 2 were on the back of the wrists of the Jaeger for punching stabs when needed. Or operated like the swords on Gypsy Breaker. There was 1 in each leg, and they could be swapped in if lost. But the favorites of the husband pilots Mike and William Brown, were the pair in the back sheaths of Bravo Dundee. With the redhead Mike joking, those before weren't knives. These are knives, as the long blades were drawn. They had yet to defeat a kaiju, but their simulations had shown exceptional skill and precision with their Jaeger. This would be their first real fight and mission and they were both excited for the chance to fight. So you two are the Titanmite's Rangers, the blue-haired were looking calmly at Melissa and Izuku. The two affirmed that, though they both look exhausted. Something Bart joked about before saying they should get to the conference room. Here. These should help with all the noise, he said before passing some special sleep earmuffs. They thank him before putting them on in the room. They get some more sleep as the other Jaegers arrive. With Gypsy coming by ship same as Usherai Brawler. With the major Jaegers gathered, the introductions were completed quickly. Including the mother-daughter duo Althea and Tita Peralta, the pilots of Mama Babarang. Jason stretched out a bit before looking to the rangers gathered and nodding. All right. Thank you all for making it here as quickly as you could. Here's the situation, our mathematicians have calculated that there will be a large attack directed at this region. He types in some details to show on the screen and brings up they had a handful of clairvoyant quirks used to double-check the results. As you all know, the Philippines and much of Southeast Asia does not have enough real defense against the kaiju. But based on the numbers, this region will be the main target. A quick typing of commands later and the possible invasion routes were displayed. If we want to stop this and keep them away from the Ring of Fire, we need to make sure they can't get a single kaiju to the volcanoes. Jason noted before acknowledging where each Jaeger would be sent when the invasion happened. Titan Might and Bravo Dundee would be set up in the center along the main path to Mayun Mountain. Verdant Edge and MangaMuse would be further to the south, acting as quick response to any kaiju detected in heading for the other volcanoes. While Ushurai Brawler would be covering the northern regions. While Gypsy Breaker would act as the last resort machine if something went wrong. We've got about 2 weeks or less before the attack. So we'll take time to adjust to the area and you too. Jason said before pointing to Melissa and Bart. He noted they needed the two of them to finish the MangaMuse special weapons. If they can't be finished or need to be completely reworked, then forget that and finish the movement systems and blades for combat. The two technician rangers salute before asking the Peraltas to show them to the monster-inspired Jaeger. As for the rest of you, get some rest. Get to know the locals. Learn about your comrades. Because we'll all be here for a while. Dismissed. Most of the rangers took Walker's advice to get comfortable with what was to come and staying ready in case the kaiju or precursors attacked early. But Izuku couldn't shake something nagging at him. Before Jason could get away, the green teen stopped him and asked to talk. "What's up, kid?" Jason asked after slipping to a weight room. Izuku let out a few tense breaths before broaching a question that had been waiting to pop. "How many do you think we'll lose in this fight?" "I'd probably say 2 crews." Jason said almost too calmly. This stunned Izuku as he thought that the marshal would be more panicked or worried about what would come for them. "Then why didn't you call in more Jaegers?" Izuku exclaimed. Walker sighed and said, "We can't rule out the possibility that even with the numbers and clairvoyance powers, that they could use it as a smokescreen and go after a different region or regions. If we take too many and they do send some Category 1 to an undefended area, we lose everything. Do you not care that we could lose good friends and defenders if this goes awry? Have you gotten to where you just see the rangers or notes on paper or a statistic?" Izuku said while grabbing Walker's shirt. Anger and indignation burning in his eyes. Though it was matched by Jason's own as he glared at the boy before quietly saying, "Let go now." Izuku's confidence and anger was rapidly doused and let go of the marshal. Jason had this to say, "It's not that I don't care. It's more that I've seen and sensed enough death and lost plenty of people to the kaiju and precursors that I've had to work pretty hard at coping with it. Though not always in healthy ways." The experienced survivor and ranger sighed as he leaned back a bit. "While I hate the idea that we'll probably lose good people in this fight, I have to stay in the moment and prepare for the future. And that means accepting that I can't save everyone. But I can do all I can to make sure no one else dies the same way." Izuku's eyes widened before looking down and tightening his fists. Saying, "That may be the hero you are, but I refuse to let us go down that easily. Even if we, have to rush to the aid of others, we will try to save everyone." His resolved gaze surprised Jason, who chuckled and patted the boy on the shoulder and told him to keep that hope in heart. "It might be what we need in this trying time," the old ranger said before excusing himself. Izuku meanwhile refused to let this be any kind of end for any of the rangers. Jason had mentioned that some sentinels were being sent down to help with evac and some cover fire. But Izuku had some other ideas on how they could work. And put in a call to Power Loader. "How fast can you pump out a number of those small Jaegers? And could you send me the specs on them? I might have some ideas on how we can improve their power, potential, and coordination with the full Jaegers. Izuku said before finding a room to work. 2 weeks. Not a ton of time. But we have to save as many as we can. Mini Gypsy. Height, 50 to 60 feet. The range is due to the need for variable sizes with small sentry Jaegers. Weight, 556 tons without extra equipment. Jaeger Mark 6.5 Rogue. Armament, scaled down versions of the Gypsy Breaker armaments. Though not all the same. While both arms have plasma casters, the right arm has a chain sword while the left arm has a shield, allowing for some better off-hand fighting if used in combination. Turtle Bomber. Height, 60 to 70 feet. Weight, 580 tons. Jaeger Mark 5 Rogue. Armament, multiple small anti-kaiju missile launchers in the back for a sustained barrage. Initially it had more equipment that seemed to belong on a mech of power loaders and/or construction equipment. These would be swapped out for a stronger punching arm and a saw-like arm. Akin to Crimson Typhoon's arms. Can roll into a ball form like that of Scrapper, a more famous rogue Jaeger. But it includes some better capabilities due to better funding and some creative ideas. Including that the ball form could be a form of attack. Especially if they have spikes coming from the defensive back plates rather than just being smooth. Bracer Demi. Height, 45 to 55 feet. Weight, 436 tons. Jaeger Mark 5.5 Rogue. Armament, a heavily armed small Jaeger. It has wrist-mounted plasma guns and smaller arms chest-mounted guns, as well as a plasma chest cannon. The special feature though is that the arms of Bracer Demi can be swapped. There is actually a second set of arms on the back of the machine and they can be rotated forward when a change in tactics is required. And by change in tactics, that means going from longer range combat to close range combat. The secondary arms are reinforced and posses deployable shields to better protect against claws and teeth from the kaiju. Coyote Pup. Height, 70 feet. Weight, 604 tons. Jaeger Mark 6.5 Rogue. Armament, it has twin shoulder plasma cannons for extra long-range fire, as well as twin sonic cannons on the wrists to play into the pilot's preference for speaking or sound. Given their quirks. The body is also reinforced and has enhanced targeting and coordinating potential. Plans for a high-frequency blade have been proposed, but making it usable without possibly destroying all the glass in the area of its use. This quartet of mini Jaegers had been a project of the UA Support and Engineering Department but was only able to brought to fruition thanks to the sacrifice of one idiot who thought he was actually capable of something worthwhile, bakugou. Thanks to him trying to cook his brain, they discovered that stronger quirks destroy more of the brain when they awaken. So simpler, weaker, or less flashy quirks that haven't changed the body's chemistry too much were sought after. After weeks of testing, they and their pilots got their chances to show what they could do in a fight with a swarm of small jawhide kaiju. With Mini Gypsy and Coyote Pup intercepting first and doing some damage. And then Turtle Bomber was able to do more damage thanks to a powerful rolling attack and missile barrage, while Bracer Demi was able to test out both of its sets of arms to blast apart another kaiju. Now this group of rookie pilots are ready to help with defending the planet with their smaller sentries. As well as paving the way for others with weaker quirks to truly be the heroes they wish they could be. I see. So that's how each of these mini Jaeger. Sentry Jaegers. Not sure what to call them. Anyway, this does give me a few ideas. Especially on where we could deploy them for the defense of the region. But we need a specific set more than others. The pups. The long-range capabilities are perfect for interception. The turtles though could be good sneak attack types or hit-and-run specialists. If anything, we don't need more of the mini gypsies or the bracer demis. If it's what Jason suspects, then we'll need cover fire more than anything. Though honestly, I'm hoping for once his instincts are wrong. Not to mention the foresight quirks. Nah. There aren't any kinds of quirks in this country that could really help. Empty Lady or anyone with a gigantification quirk are all way too small for these fights. They don't even or barely even come to most kaiju's knees in comparison. And that's if we're up against just category 3s. Wait. CRP. Can't help but get caught up in my mental ramblings and wanderings. Can I think aloud before sending off an email to the companies making the parts for the mini Jaegers. I'll send the same to Majima-san. He can have them focus on the machines that would do us the most good. And if we position a few of them here, and here, we'll be able to do some more damage. Now I just need to convince the rest of the Rangers tomorrow to let the wait. What do we call the mini Jaeger pilots? Sheriffs? Feels a little weak. Maybe they could. I'm doing it again. I aggressively rub my head and let out a groan upon realizing that I was going into a mental mumble spree again. And with quick slap of my cheeks I focus in again and double-check the map and start writing some notes for the meeting. With some luck, they'll agree. Probably. As the next day was starting, Melissa rubbed the sleep from her eyes before making her way to Izuku's quarters. Upon opening the door, she was surprised to see him still sitting in front of a few maps and computer. With the schematics of the mini Jaegers still pulled up. What are you thinking about, Izuku? Melissa questioned in her head before making her way over to him. Who then blushed when she noticed one part of Izuku was at attention. He was leaned back in his chair sleeping, so it was quite obvious to see. The young ranger gulped as she was reminded of what they got up to while at the resort, but shook it off and stepped to the side. Gently coming behind the sleeping Izuku and wrapping him in a hug. Hey! Wake up! We need you ready to go. Melissa said with a kiss on Izuku's cheek. This got the green teen to stir and he started to open his bleary eyes. And then smiled as he looked up and saw Melissa's face next to him. Hey! Oh wow! Is it morning already? He asked as Melissa stopped embracing him. The girl confirmed the matter before saying, I take it you've been trying to come up with some extra plan? One that involves the mini Jaegers. Izuku nodded before saying, Jason may be comfortable with the idea that some of the crews might die. But I'm not giving up easy and I'm not just going to let it happen. If I have to, I'll tip the scales our way a bit. Even if it means using something under-tested. Melissa winced and didn't disagree with what he said. Even with the initial projections and strong showing during their first deployment, the mini Jaeger project was still seen as risky and complicated. Let alone the fact that now even some from a formerly opposing faction was willing to support them. That being the Hearts and Minds Party and a few researchers from Deternat. Probably because it means that some people with quirks can really factor into the fights with the kaiju. They learned the hard way that all of their people with strong quirks can't do anything and it cost them plenty of money and people, she reasoned with a frown. Izuku agreed before chuckling a bit. In a lot of ways, all of them feeling useless or powerless is no different from what you and I have felt more than a few times. Now the shoe just happens to be on the other foot. Melissa gives him a side-eyed look before saying they could talk about these things later. We should get lunch and get ready for the briefing, she said with a nod to the door. And Izuku returned it before following her to the mess hall. Meeting up with all of the pilots before heading to the briefing room. As you were. Jason says as he and Jesus arrive to address the Rangers. He brings up the maps of the Philippines on the hollow screens. Here's the situation both the number crunchers and the Foresight Quirk folks have given us. In a few days we'll be facing a number of kaiju rushing these regions. You all know your jobs, so here's your assignments. With that, the Marshal illustrates the locations for each of the 7 machines. The holy CRP, that is a mouthful. Got a shorter name for this mamababarang thing? He asked Althea. Who frowned at the man before sighing and saying, how big mama? Jesus chuckles before saying, it works. Anyway, you'll be positioned in the bay near Legaspi with Gypsy Breaker and Bravo Dundee. Yes, it's mostly because you 4 haven't fully been tested in combat, but let's move on. The map then. Illustrated that Titan Might would be stationed with Usurai Brawler towards the northern edge of the country and islands. While Scud Maxter and Verdant Edge would be towards the south and protecting those volcanoes. We know at least 7 will arrive in the next few days. And not long after that, 5 days we suspect, another group will emerge. And then another group 3 days later. Though these are rough estimates at best. True enough, Chief. But we've also got the worry about smaller kaiju based on what Melissa and Izuku reported happening in Japan. Luckily, those pequeño bastardo were taken out by some unexpected backup. Jesus noted with showing off the images of the battle and the actions taken by the hero students. Jason rolled his eyes before saying, "We'll cross that bridge when we get there." The small ones can't trigger any of the volcanoes though. Not enough kaiju blew in their systems for that. More importantly thought, we need to focus on the incoming invasion force. Evacuations are underway, yes. As he was saying this, he pulled up the contact for the president of the Philippines, who reported in his native tongue that they had evacuated the capital and a number of other cities and towns across the islands. But there has been some pushback. Nothing too extreme but well. The marshal sighed and just advised to do what they could. In the meantime, we'll all focus on coordinating and reviewing the probable kaiju types that will be coming in. Jesus said before bringing up a number of kaiju that Jason had seen multiple of in the black. The main ones being the acid quills, bone spurs, and various other category 3. We shouldn't discount the possibility that they could send in some copperheads and maybe Kazari. But they take longer to grow and form, I think. Jason noted before reminding them that there was also a worry about category V and 6. Upon mentioning of the VIs, everyone audibly gulped. Do you really think it's possible that they'd send something like that in? The red and blue-haired Tita asked with fear across her face as she was shown a picture of Breacher. Jason looked up and had to suppress his own shudder of fear and unease from his memories of sneaking by that beast while trying to get out of the black. Jesus gently elbowed Jason to get him to snap back to focus. What? Oh, probably not. But if there's anything I've learned while being a ranger, it's ready for the unexpected and unforeseen. Especially when it comes to anything from the precursors. After an hour or two of comparing notes and suggestions of how to handle the kaiju and the aftereffects, the rangers were dismissed to recover and recenter. With Izuku trying to get to know the husband-wife duo of Ushurai Brawler, Pietro and Sonya Medvedev. The man being a stereotypical build of a big Russian bear. Even having a big beard on his face. Though more of a polar bear with that hair of his. Izuku thought with a small smile while working out in the Shatter Dome. And watching as Pietro deadlifted over 500 pounds of weight again and again. Sonya meanwhile was smaller, but no less muscular compared to her husband. Especially as she was bench pressing 1.5 times what Izuku currently was. She stood 5 foot 11 inches tall or 180 centimeters, just under her husband who was 6 foot 4. And while her husband had white hair and black eyes, she had chestnut brown hair and green eyes. Kinda like mine. No different shade of green. Izuku thought while looking between the pair. Is something you need? Pietro rumbled out with a chilling glare directed Izuku's way. Who gulped once before saying, not exactly but I was trying to get a feel for how to break the ice with you too. The Russians both gave him cold looks before Sonya said, really? Breaking ice with a pair of Russians? Izuku stopped his thoughts with a screech and then stammering to try and recover from what he thought was a serious faux pas. As he was fumbling his words, he could hear a rumble from where Pietro was standing. His face paling as he looked over at the large man, who seemed to be shaking. Before he could pass out, Sonya spoke up again. Dear. You should ease up on laughing. I think you're giving boy heart attack, she says with a small smile. This makes Izuku's thoughts stop short and he almost face faults. The big man walks over and pats Izuku on the head. The teen barely making out the hints of the smile beneath the beard of white. Peleg, Malchik. She was just having a bit of fun with you. And we are all some of first rangers for our Earth. So, we should compare and talk more. Pietro says while Sonya's icy look melts and she gives Izuku a gentle smile. Melissa meanwhile took a moment to calm down as well. Before getting pranked by the Russian Rangers who glared at her for being American with Sonya glowering down at her before getting glomped. They would share stories and some strategies over the next few days. As well as teasing between the elder couple about what Izuku and Melissa had been doing before coming to the Philippines. So we get pulled from homeland after fight to join even bigger fight. And you two get pulled down after fun-filled vacation. That included some warming of beds, yes. Sonya said with a flirty wink directed the teens' way. Who both blushed and ducked down before both saying, yes, before trying to change the subject to details about some of the other Jaegers for their nations. Before more talks could continue, they'd spent a few days just talking about their pasts and how each had met. It was time for the operation. It was around 1 a.m. when the crews hurried to their Jaegers and linked up with one another and their AIs. Titan Might standing by. Bridget announced before spinning up the rest of the systems on the Jaeger. As Ushurai Brawler's Rangers were hooking up, the con pods sunk deeper into the body and the armored plates shifted into position. As electricity crackled in the claw/grappling sections of its hands, the AI was calibrating the systems. Ushurai Brawler linked, charged, and ready, the deep voice of Chernobog announced while the Medvedevs were loosening the tension in their muscles. Poidum, let's go. Pietro said as Jason gave the initial all-clear for the Jaegers to move out. Each marching out with their own strides and postures. Bart joked as Verdant Edge stepped into the water, "Race ya," to Scud Maxter before quickly moving ahead. The cowboy beast killer shakes its head before trying to catch up with the high-speed swords machine. As Big Mama and Bravo Dundee stepped out, you could see each of the pieces of the machines calibrating and cycling through the systems. Dundee tested out the deployment of the heat knives and the positioning and targeting systems of the shoulder gun and rocket launcher. Its build and body language similar to Maxter as it moved through the water. For the first Filipino Jaeger, it was smaller and more feminine in build. Similar to Verdant Edge and Saber Athena. Deploying the right Laring plasma blade and adjusting the positioning for the left arm Balareo daggers. First from being a punch type of blade, then reverse gripped, then standard grip of the hilt. And then shifting the sections covering the missile launchers. We couldn't get the nano-devouring warheads perfected, but a barrage of a few standard anti-kaiju warheads should help with this first fight. Melissa reported as she and Izuku were making their way to their position. Naintindian understood. We'll make the most of what we have. Althea responded. While doing some practice swings with the blades. Jason and Jesus spoke up next and reminded the two of their jobs. You stay at the Miracle Mile. You'll probably get your chance to fight, but it's better if you stay as a safety net. Move out. Jesus says while Gypsy Breaker rolls its neck and hops once or twice on the ball of its feet to get ready for the fight ahead. Passing the two new Jaegers and crews as they stop at their position 10 miles off the coast. With Titan Might and Ushurai Brawler, they had reached their position and were 25 miles from the shore. Sensors aren't picking anything up right now. Anything from my island? Izuku asked as they stood by for the fight to come. Bridget took a moment to check and reported back on confirmation of direction and number. 7 for sure. And they have identified 3 of them. 2 bone spurs and an acid quill. So, 3 category 3s already. The rest they suspect are category 4 and up. And we've got 2 category IVs heading for Titan Might and Ushurai Brawler. Bridget announced over comms and giving a time frame of 15 minutes before they would arrive. Both pairs of pilots shared nods with one another and had their AIs give them projected paths. We'll take North Kaiju. Titan might head south. Pietro announced and the 2 younger rangers agreed. You ready for this? Izuku asked Melissa. Who smiled before saying, you already know the answer. Let's do this. All of the rangers felt the tension in the air as they got the reports on what should be coming their way. With 2 of the Category 3s heading towards the capital along with a Category V. And the last Category 3 and another V were headed for Verdant Edge and Scudmaxter. Izuku and Melissa tensed and released their hands a few times as they watched the screens and cameras. As the creature was finally reaching them, Titan Might's visor flashed blue and the V section on the head lit up. The one that burst from the surf near Titan Might was a tall, thin, gray-skinned kaiju with a blue bioluminescent glow emitted from its eyes and mouth. It had long arms that end in sharp claws and jagged spines that run from its head to its long tail. Its mouth is gigantic, with several rows of teeth, some of which were growing outside the mouth itself. And 3 pairs of external mandibles that resemble those of an insect. Well, this thing is ugly, Izuku quipped before they got into a ready stance to attack the kaiju. It unleashed a high-pitched roar and rushed towards Titan Might. The Rangers smirked as they were ready to dodge to the side and strike it from behind or the side, ducking under the pouncing claws of the creature. Too easy, Melissa called out as they went for a body blow, only to be surprised when the creature moved down slightly and evaded most of the attack, and left it in a prime spot to slip in and body check the Jaeger. What the? Izuku called out before they tried to punch the creature again. But it evaded just by a small margin each time. How is it doing this? Melissa asked after they took another hit from the kaiju. It wasn't as though they didn't impact it at all, but the creature seemed to always know where they were coming from. Ah, that explains it, Bridget announces before showing the fact this was an archived kaiju. A spine jackal. It had dozens of eyes that are spread throughout its body, completely covering its head and being in unusual places such as its external mandibles, back, wrists and elbows. Izuku groans before saying, "Of course we're fighting a precognitive type," before blocking a claw strike with the left arm and then quickly making a blade hand for a Carolina slash with the right arm. Doing so allowed them to cut off one of the hands of the kaiju. But before they could do more damage, Spine Jackal jumped backwards and roared again. "Any suggestions, Bridget?" Melissa asked before they activated the Minnesota barrage barrels and started firing. And the kaiju dodged most of the fired warheads. The Rangers grunt as the beast moved in and shoulder tackled Titan. But this was some of what they were hoping for, as they brought the outstretched arms down HRD on Spine Jackal's back and cracked apart some of its spines and damaged some of the eyes. Bridget finally found the records and told her pilots how it was beaten. It took 2 Australian Jaegers to defeat this creature originally. One to distract and occupy its eyes, stun it with a strong blow, and the other striker Eureka threw a wind turbine blade at it. Interesting. Any chance you could give us some help, Brawler? Melissa said as they stood to engage the kaiju again. But Ushurai Brawler was in no position to render assistance. This beast is quite impressive. It is taking all of Ushurai's strength to hold it, Pietro reported with a grunt. The creature they were up against was another archived kaiju. This one being Insurrector, whose massive limbs were held back enough by Brawler's own strong arms and the electric current running through them to tase it. That wasn't stopping it from trying to lean on and crush the Jaeger, or trying to get closer to bite into the head of Brawler. Thank goodness for Russian focus on winning or else, Sonya said as they held back the beast. They were nowhere near close to the head of their Jaeger. Chernobog reported that they needed to break the stalemate if they hoped to succeed. Melissa and Izuku cursed under their breath as they traded blows with Spine Jackal, and then being shocked as it fired a number of its spines at the Jaeger. It couldn't do that in the records, Bridget announced as some of the barbs embedded themselves in the arm and side of Titan Might. Oh great! I'm going to be fixing those hydraulics, Melissa shouted as they intercepted a biting attack with a punch to the kaiju's face. Izuku thought for a few moments before asking, did they discover anything else about the eyes of these things? As Bridget was looking, they got close to try another Carolina slash before trying the Kansas cannon for a short blast of nuclear power. But the creature dodges both of the attacks. We need to obstruct its vision. That's it, Izuku thinks aloud before Melissa catches onto his plan. Don't know if it'll work, but we've gotta try, she says before firing the cannon a few more times into the water. Causing two things. First was making a decent-sized steam cloud due to the contrast of the nuclear blast and ocean, obscuring the vision of Spinejackal's upper eyes. The second advantage was the blast also put some of the hot salty water into the lower eyes of the kaiju. It roared in pain from that and shied away for a moment. But that moment was what the pair needed as they fired up all of the jets on Titan Might, blasting forward for a strong, double Texas impact attack. As the Texas booster elbow rockets adjusted minutely to cause maximum damage to the body of Spinejackal, the Rangers heard and somewhat felt the cracking of multiple bones and spines in the kaiju, before it seemed to skip across the water slightly. Its jaw and part of its neck broken due to the right fist impacting those areas, while the left had done massive damage to the back of the beast and it seemed to be paralyzed. Titan Might stalked up and exposed the Minnesota barrage barrels again. Legaspi, this is Titan Might. One kaiju down, Izuku said with narrowed eyes, as they began to fire dozens of missiles into the body of Spinejackal, it roaring as it felt the impacts and then the explosions bursting apart the body and blasting the kaiju blue away. Hope everyone else is doing alright, the pair thought before moving to Adashirai. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for more crossovers. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author HanBaron on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.